But it made me think about what you were saying about the Tucker Carlson Putin interview. And I don't think this is going to make me very popular, but I'm going to say it anyway. And that is that I think we have an inability to understand where Putin is coming from. That is not to say that it justifies the invasion of Ukraine. Nothing justifies the invasion of another country these days. We are, this is not 200 years ago, right? So this is not how things are done. But having said that, if you want to tell the story of Putin, then he just sees what's going on in a very, very different way. He sees that he was once, in his lifetime, and you guys are too young to remember this, but, as somebody who saw the fall of the Berlin Wall in my teens, the USSR was one of the two big superpowers in the world. And to watch that turn into, the Russia of today is, I think, deeply humiliating for both, Putin himself, but also for the entire country, right? And he just never felt that Russia got the respect that it deserved, especially after the West, after the United States won the Cold War. There were certain agreements that he felt had been infringed upon, and people can argue about what that should look like. But frankly, it almost doesn't matter because he feels like, and really this matters, right? It's how he feels about this situation, that those agreements have been violated and that there would be this buffer zone. And
or the not 1 inch.
And the yes, exactly. So he, for us, we look at the EU and NATO as being two completely separate entities. And he just looks at it as being the West. He sees those two as one and the same. We don't feel that is true, right? So when there was the possibility of accession for Ukraine into the EU, he flipped out. And if you're thinking about it from the Russian perspective and he doesn't trust the West, then he thinks it looks like something quite different. And it doesn't look like that from the rest of the other NATO allies, right? So these are the differences, I would say. Like some of these differences seems relatively subtle to him, there are no differences. And for us, they seem like, why would you think that the EU and NATO are different and aren't different entities when to us they so clearly are, right? So this is what I mean by that shift in perspective. If you don't trust the West, then how can you trust this, right? And when you're us, if you're coming from the West, you're like, these are completely different entities. This is not what we're proposing. We do not want to invade Russia, right? So when I was talking about inclusion, part of that and why identity is so important, part of what you are trying to do in a conversation that often has to deal with deep trauma is to recognize what the other side has been through. And for some people, that other side starts 50 years ago. And for other people, that other side of the story starts 100 years ago, right? So you will start your narrative at a different point. And the other side will see that some events are incredibly important and others will see that those same events were not as important, right?
Is the solution to Ukraine, Russia as simple as just getting Putin and Zelensky in a room?
Yeah. I don't think it's going to be as simple as just getting the two of them in a room. They have very different views about how this should end, right? And I think there's a difficulty here too, that it's very difficult when your country is under attack to give up any part of your country, right? How do you ask a president to do that, right? That I think that's a very difficult decision to have to make. Having said that, not having him in the room feels just crazy. And that it's not even that, it's that who you think of as being your closest ally undermining you in that way, I think is very problematic, right? So there's that. And I would hope that this war ends. I don't know on what terms it will, and whether or not Trump will impose his will in some way into this. But oftentimes when the settlement is too unfavorable to one side or the other, then, or perceived to be too unfavorable by one side or the other, then you'll just have instability, right? This is, in some of the work that we did earlier on the project on elite bargains, we called that misalignment, right? That the power on the ground is not set at the same to really be equal to the power, to the distribution of power in the deal, right? So if the deal and what's happening on the ground are not well aligned and people feel like there's a mismatch there, you're just going to end up with another war again, right? So those kinds of things don't hold well, and it takes something else to make sure that it lasts.
Yeah.
So for that, you might get something in the short run that might not hold in the long run. And that is also a horrific, that would be horrific as well, to see that war start up again.